Being born is unfair. But what do I mean by that? Well, ever since I became an antinatalist, life really seems like something you should have to sign a contract to take on. Coming into existence is enormous and irreversible, and it's something that none of us even got to consent to. Yet, when we make less significant but still significant decisions in our lives, like mortgages, marriage, getting a job, we tend to need to sign a contract for that so we know what we're getting into. They outline the risks, responsibilities, and potential consequences of the action we're deciding to take so that we can make an informed decision. But for life itself, the most significant of all commitments, nothing, no consent, just two random people make a decision on your behalf and they're hardly an unbiased party. It's insane. So in this video, we're going to be going into what an existence contract, if that's not too ominous a term, could look like. Of course, in reality, there's no good reason to think that anyone exists before they come into existence to even review a contract.
It's not as a long sort of cabinet full of potential ghost fetuses going, we want to be born, right?
But that for me just goes to restate how unethical creating someone is. Now, before we go over everything that I think would maybe be included in an existence contract, I want to say that I am going to leave aside things that I don't think often get overlooked in the decision to create someone, but that if such a contract existed, it would be included on there. And that's the supposed benefits of coming into existence. I'm not convinced there are any genuine benefits, but either way, these aren't overlooked by and large. Our world is extremely pro-natalist. I'm going to be focusing on the clauses I think would be in the contract that I do think are generally overlooked by the average person when deciding whether to create someone. So let's get stuck into it. Clause 1. You will experience significant pain and suffering. Pain and suffering are inevitable. Even the best lives contain significant amounts of them. And some lives are much worse than that. If you want to go into this in much more detail, then check out my video, Why Life is Worse Than You Think. It's linked in the description. Clause 2. You risk succumbing to extreme suffering. Some lives are truly awful. Chronic illness, debilitating injuries, relentless psychological suffering. There is no way for you to know prior to signing this contract if you will lead one of those lives. Clause 3. You will often be misinformed or underinformed on what is best. You won't always have access to the information you need to make the best decision for your welfare or the welfare of others. And even when you do, you won't always know how to appropriately use that information. And this could lead to serious harm befalling you or others. Clause 4. You will have limited control over your psychology. Your genetics and environment will shape your mind, which in turn will have a range of emotional tendencies, psychological biases, sensitivities, and more. You will have some control over these things, but usually only with effort. And you may be predisposed to some forms of mental illness. You don't get to choose what your factory settings are. Clause 5. You will exist in a universe with no cosmic meaning. The balance of argument doesn't seem to support any supernatural being existing that has created the universe or oversees it. There is no cosmic justice, purpose, or fairness. Suffering, including your own, will have no ultimate purpose. You may find some terrestrial meaning, but even this isn't guaranteed. And this circumstance may lead you to have anxiety and psychological distress. Clause 6. You will observe great injustice and hardship. The universe can be a cruel and indifferent place, and that goes for the agents within it as well. You'll likely observe a large amount of injustice and suffering, and this can cause you psychological distress, and oftentimes you'll be helpless to do anything about it. Clause 7. You cannot choose the conditions of your birth. The world is deeply unequal. You could be born into wealth or poverty, stability or chaos, safety or danger. You don't know where, to whom, or under what circumstances you will be created. Clause 8. Anything you build or achieve can be taken away. If you're to accrue success, relationships, status, financial security, these can be lost in an instant through accident, betrayal, death, or simple bad luck. In time, even that which you cherish and looked forward to may seem mundane as your psychology adapts and it becomes part of normalcy. Clause 9. Luck, both good and bad, could play a large role in your life. Much of what determines your well-being, your health, the opportunities you get, and your safety is beyond your control, and often it can come down to luck. Clause 10. You will form attachments to impermanent things and people. Everything changes and everything ends. The people, places, and objects that you form attachments to will change or die. This will cause you pain that could be intolerable. Clause 11. You must work to maintain basic well-being. Most people have to work to obtain basic goods and services. And jobs can be unsatisfying, dangerous, or just outright harmful, yet they're often necessary to meet your basic needs. You may have little choice over what work you do, and sometimes there will be no safety net to catch you. Clause 12. You will have economic and legal obligations. Taxes and other legal requirements on you may coerce you to act in ways that you wouldn't otherwise do so, and ultimately this will be under the threat of violence. Sometimes the taxes you pay will go to fund things that you find morally wrong. Clause 13. You will face social pressure to conform. Culture dictates many aspects of life. You will be expected to conform to at least some extent under the threat of awkwardness, ostracization, legal punishment, and even sometimes physical violence. In some places, simply being gay is still punishable legally. You won't know in advance which society you come into or what expectations are put upon you. Clause 14. People you care about will have expectations of you. Your family, friends, and other meaningful people in your life will have hopes and expectations of you, and some of these may conflict with what you want to do. These situations are going to be numerous throughout the life you lead, and they will be tricky to navigate. Clause 15. You will feel pressure to sign someone else up to this contract. Societal expectations and personal desire may steer you towards procreating yourself, probably without due deliberation and ethical consideration. This will mean you sign someone else up for this very contract. Clause 16. You will have moral duties that require personal sacrifice. Avoiding harm to others will sometimes mean denying yourself things that bring you pleasure and convenience, like refraining from consuming other animals. You may even be raised by parents that encourage a lack of attention towards your duties, and this will make them harder to meet. And finally, clause 17, there is no easy exit. The only way out is death, and most people that end up wanting to die earlier than they otherwise would face immense difficulty in doing so. Assisted dying is restricted, and many suicide methods are painful, unreliable, and traumatic for those left behind. You will also have an evolutionary drive against death, which will make it, even when it's in your best interests, hard to realize. So that's a long list, and there are likely many more clauses that I've completely missed off. The question is, if presented with this contract, and obviously those clauses are only part of what the contract would actually look like in the round, would that be something that you'd actually sign up to? Ultimately, we don't know. The issue, of course, is that this isn't reality. No one gets to dispassionately consider the pros and cons of coming into existence. In reality, no one exists to review a contract. But likewise, no one exists to want to come into existence either.
We want to be born, right?
And so creating someone and imposing these terms on them, at least in my eyes, seems highly unethical when the alternative in not creating them doesn't deprive that potential being of anything. It's up to each of us to decide if signing someone else up to these terms is fair and decent. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Did I miss anything out? And I'll see you in the next one.